Gotta stop that. Can't have that national security threat. Oh my gosh. All right, everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of Zillennial Money. So I am always your host, the world's greatest host and MC. My name is Andy. In case this is your first time here, and why don't you all introduce yourselves? Well, we'll stop doing that eventually at some point once we're 30, 40 episodes in. But, in the beginning, we have a lot of new people joining. So yeah, gonna ask you guys to introduce yourselves pretty consistently. But yeah, take it away, guys.
Okay, what is good? My name is Dominic. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel as well as the Clips channel. And yeah.
Hey guys, it's Tristan here. We've got a pretty packed docket for you today, so gonna be a pretty exciting show. So let's get right into it. Pass it back to Andy for that.
All right, sounds great. So let's not waste any more time and jump right into today's story. So first story of tonight is BYD. So in case you guys don't know what BYD is, it's a Chinese EV manufacturer, electric vehicles. And BYD just introduced a new vehicle called the Seagull, which supposedly gets around 300 kilometers of range. So not too much range, but the attractive part is that it only costs $9,700 US, which, granted, per capita income in China is a lot lower compared to countries like Canada and the United States. But still, China is becoming more and more developed as the years go by, and their rate of growth is much faster than Canada or the United States or any of the Western countries. So people are getting richer, but we're seeing kind of EVs and stuff like this getting cheaper and cheaper. I personally, I think that if there was a vehicle that was available in, let's say, Canada for around 10,000 US, so that would work out to be around, maybe 12 to 13,000 Canadian dollars. If a vehicle was around that price, an electric vehicle, and it could get 300 kilometers of range, I think that would be super popular, right? But because it's a Chinese company, BYD is a Chinese company, and like Canada, the United States are kind of locked in a trade war with China. There's a lot of like political blockages to maybe getting that vehicle here. But on that note, clearly it's possible to do it for such a low price, right? So do you think that, like, why can't Canada do EVs, right? Like there's no EV brands, or there's no car brands in China, in Canada, as far as I'm aware at all, right? So what's preventing Canada from achieving a goal like this, like making an EV and making it cheap? Because if we see China's been able to do it for a long time, and if we even look at the United States with Tesla, although they're not quite that cheap, the Model 3 has been coming down in price drastically. And also the US government's kind of helping with that as well by giving out subsidies. So I think the cheapest state you can get a Tesla is in Colorado, which I think at one point, with the rebates and all the tax benefits you're going to get, it's like you can get a Tesla Model 3 for under 40,000 US, which it's like, pretty low considering that it's going to be on par with a lot of gasoline options, right? So, I want to toss a question back to you guys. What do you think is like kind of the blockage of Canada being a player on the electric vehicle kind of manufacturing space, or just pushing electric vehicles and getting electric vehicles into more people's hands in the first place? And maybe you could take it from another angle as well. Maybe you could argue that we shouldn't be going down that space. We should just be relying on other countries because we're not good at it. So I'm just curious to hear what you guys think, right? So let me toss the question back to you guys. What is wrong with the Canadian car manufacturer industry?
I think the Canadian car manufacturing industry is just a little too slow. It's like when other countries do specific things, we take a little bit longer before we get them over here. And on top of the matter, in fact, I don't think there's a lot of EV charging stations around here in like Canada in general versus the States, especially in like California. So I think in general, it's just a little too early. And as previously mentioned before, I think most people are pretty much opting for hybrid options, if not just gasoline options, because at this moment in time, it's a little more efficient and too early. But that's what I think as of right now.
All right, Tristan.
I think it's also important to remember that it's a lot less practical in a larger country like Canada for something with a shorter range. So having only 300 kilometers, like that, for most of your driving shouldn't be a problem. But if you're buying only one vehicle, you're going to want something that can do more than that, or can be, have the range increased substantially for the without a significant increase in the amount of time, right? So I think that one, like, even if you had a car with 300 range also, I'm not sure what BYD does for protection about the battery cells deteriorating. So if 300 is the cap and then it just gets worse from there, I could see it also being a bit of a problem on that front where you buy it with 300 and then at some point it just stops being at 300 and then now you can't go very far with it, especially with Canadian winters being so brutal on batteries. I would think it'd be pretty difficult. And then with regards to our industry itself, it's for car manufacturing. Most of our car manufacturing in Canada seems to be American companies, not Canadian companies or anything. So it's basically we're just using we're not getting as much investment into those, I don't think. So I think that's going to be a bit of a stopper on that front.
Well, that's the kind of follow-up question, right? Like, do you think that is kind of like a problem? Like, should we be going down the pathway of, making a Canadian car manufacturing industry, right? So the reason why I bring it up is because I think with EVs especially, you need natural resources, right? You need certain amounts of metal to make the battery. So these batteries are made from minerals like nickel, like iron, cobalt, stuff like that. And Canada is known for being one of the world's richest resource-rich country, right? So it's also one of the richest countries, like in general, right? If you look at it on a per capita basis. So I think we both have the talent. Like we have a lot of high tech people here as well. So we have the talent, we have the natural resources, and like we don't have to build cars to like export to the world. We could just build cars to use for ourselves too, right? And as what you said about like the 300 kilometer range, it is a bit low. I would agree with you on that. However, I think with the price point of around 10,000 US dollars, I think that fits into a very good niche, right? So it's going to be used for certain use cases like just commuting around the city or getting groceries. And I don't know about you, but like I haven't driven more than 300 kilometers in a day in like a very long time, because these days, like what I use my car for is just to like go get groceries or go for a coffee from time to time. And like I work from home, so I don't need to commute to work. But even if I did need to commute to work, hopefully you live within 150 kilometers of where you work, right? Because otherwise there'll be quite the long commute. So 150 kilometers there, 150 back. I feel like
even if you were to use it for commuting, it would be enough for most people for 90% of use cases. And yeah, I agree. Like if you're trying to go on a road trip, it'll be like pretty annoying to have to stop and charge it all the time. But it, it's I don't think it's like really worth it to like it'll be worth it for a lot of people to just buy this car just so that they can get to work, right? It's like designed for people who just want a car to get them around and they don't care about the advanced features and all that stuff. And I just wish we had an option like that in Canada, right? Which like we don't. If you want a car with that only costs $10,000, you're gonna have to buy like a really old used Corolla or something like that, probably, right? But I wish we had something that was like a new option that cost that low that like people can opt for their specific use cases if they just want something to get around. But what do you guys think about that?
I think like standalone, like 97 like $1,000 USD is like a really nice price. And then like you said, if you're like someone who's just going to the grocery store or like wants to grab a cup of coffee that's super duper close, like 300 kilometers, yeah, I guess it's fine. I think the only like issue is that there aren't many charging stations around, so you would have to charge just locally, just via your house or something. But it also, like, I feel like you're right too. It isn't really fair to us Canadians that we don't have this option versus like other countries having this option. But I guess it is what it is, and I just think it's still a little too early for EVs, like in this matter. But I mean, there is hopefully a space for it in the future that can like prosper with like better infrastructure in the future. So yeah.
Yeah, well, with regards to the charging stations, actually, like most of these cars are designed to charge overnight at home. I know some people live in condos, so maybe that's not like that would be a barrier, right? Like if your condo doesn't support charging, but there has been talks about different companies moving to NACS, which is it's an acronym for North American Standard. It's like Tesla's supercharging port, essentially, that other companies are using it and adapting their ports to that standard. So in the future, you could potentially pull up to a Tesla supercharging station, and if your car uses NACS, then it plugs right in, and you can just pay Tesla for and use their infrastructure. Right? So yeah, I think there's solutions around there, and it's just like I kind of think about maybe when people move from horses to cars, there weren't like gas stations around initially, right? Like somebody had to go and build a gas station. So it's like we can probably vastly expand our charging infrastructure and make it a lot better if more people got cars. But it's kind of like electric cars, I mean, but it's kind of like a vicious cycle, right? Where if not enough people get electric cars, then there's no like kind of momentum to expand that infrastructure. And as a result, nobody gets electric cars. So it's kind of like I think the government has the opportunity to kind of disrupt that cycle by pushing for an expansion of the infrastructure. And we'll talk about that later. But Tristan, do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I definitely think that your point about I want to kind of make a comment about your point with like horse and buggy versus like the first gas cars, etc. And I think one thing to remember on that front is that there is over a
could you rewind? I think you cut out at the most important part.
Oh no. Yeah, so I think so with regards to the stable versus like gas car thing, I think the one factor you're not really taking into account with that comparison with regards to EVs versus gas cars is that there is a clear advantage to the car versus the horse and buggy, right? It's significantly faster. It's significantly easier to maintain in the sense of like you don't have to feed it. Like you give it gas, but like that's a lot easier than the horse that needs a lot more care and needs more rest, etc. So I think the problem with EVs is that it's harder for us to incentivize people to build out the infrastructure because there is not such a clear, this is superior to gas, because there are a lot of downsides to the EVs currently still. So until all of that gets figured out, maybe like the range, or the big ones are the range or the speed at which it can be recharged. If those two items can get figured out so that they're basically on par with gas vehicles, I think EVs will suddenly catapult into much better. But until then, I think it's really difficult for EVs to become anything more than like more of like a commuting vehicle. Right.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that. Those are some pretty good points. So what you're saying is basically like the hop from horses to cars initially is a much greater hop than the hop from, internal combustion to electric vehicles, right? And yeah, I can kind of see that. Personally, I still drive gasoline cars, right? And the reason for that is not because I don't like EVs. In fact, I want to switch to an EV. However, it's just, my gasoline car works, and I don't I can't justify spending a ton of money to upgrade to an electric car when I already have a gas car that works and is relatively cheap. Like, I drive a Volkswagen Jetta, so it's a relatively cheap car to refuel as well. So yeah, I definitely do get your points about just the incentive right now is not enough to upgrade, especially when electric vehicles are still on average more expensive than gasoline vehicles, right? So I totally get that. But with that, I wanted to maybe move on to our next topic, which ties into this topic that we're talking about right now, which is how what the government can do to kind of motivate this transition to EVs, because we're all environmentalists here, right? We all care about the environment, and EVs do have the potential to be more environmentally friendly. Now, I know like people are going to push back and be like, it depends on where you get the power from. But here in Canada, I think, or at least in Ontario, we get most of the power in Ontario from nuclear and from hydro. So it's a very clean energy mix. So if you're driving an electric vehicle in Ontario, it is a lot more environmentally friendly than driving a gasoline vehicle, because the energy also comes from renewable resources when you're using electricity. But anyways, I digress. The next topic I wanted to talk about was the climate action incentive. So for those of you who don't know what this is a program that the Trudeau government introduced, where they kind of, as a way to sell the carbon tax to the Canadian people, right? So the Trudeau government introduced this extra tax on carbon consumption, or carbon producers in general. So if you're, oil gas company, if you consume a lot of natural gas or fossil fuel products, then you'll get hit with an extra carbon tax. Now, this has been controversial because it not only applies to the companies, but it also applies to, just people heating their homes. And as some of you know, in case you haven't noticed, it can get pretty cold in Canada. So when people heat their homes, they get hit with this carbon tax, and it's caused a huge controversy. And there's like debates about if heating oil should be exempted, and then there's a huge fight over it. I'm not going to get into that. I think we talked about that maybe briefly on a previous episode, so I'm not going to just kind of reiterate everything again. But essentially, the Trudeau government, with this climate action initiative, which has been renamed to the carbon tax rebate, what they're doing is they're taking part of the money that they collected from the carbon tax and giving it back to the people. So I think with an estimate, the latest estimate puts it around maybe like $1,700, so 1,700 Canadian dollars collected per year per person. And personally, my rebates are much less than $1,700, so I'm getting like much less than that back. I don't know about you guys, because I think it depends on sort of your income, and it's like slightly different for everyone. But my question to you is, like, do you think that this program, like, do you think the carbon tax makes sense in the first place, right? Because this is a big topic of contention. Should we scrap the carbon tax? And if yes, if no, regardless of what your answer to that is, what do you think about the carbon tax rebate program? Now, I have strong opinions about this, but I'll reserve my opinion and not poison you guys' mind and let you guys answer it first. But yeah, let me toss a question to you guys. What do you think of the carbon tax? What do you think of the carbon tax rebate? Don't speak all at once.
Yeah. So the carbon tax has always been such a weird thing for me because, I hear a lot about it. I see it on my bills, and yet I have no idea what the heck they're spending the funds from the carbon tax on to, reduce emissions to help the environment in general. And I think that fact alone makes me less inclined towards it because I don't know exactly what they're doing, and it's not been clearly advertised what they're doing with those funds. And then the whole rebate aspect of it, it's like, okay, you're taking my money and then giving it back to me. Like, it's okay. It's just the whole messaging with it is super weird because it's not like they've gone and been like, look at all these things we're doing with this money that is like going to help the environment, that's going to like help preserve Canada and the world for future generations. This is all this hard investments and stuff. And maybe on that front, maybe I'm just not seeing it. But either way, it's not being communicated necessarily to me in a fashion that I understand what I am paying for when I pay the carbon tax. And because of that fact, when I see the bill expense on my bills for the carbon tax, I'm like, okay, what's it for? It just feels like another additional expense that, I don't really want to pay, because especially when I can't see what it's being used for. So I think that the whole rebate carbon tax in general, it just feels like it's extremely poorly communicated. And if it is doing anything, it's not being communicated what it's doing. And if it isn't doing anything, it's just making my life more expensive. And that kind of sucks. So that's kind of what I think of it.
Yeah, to add on, I don't think it's just like Tristan necessarily who thinks it's like a really expensive expense. Like, to be frank, I myself don't pay any carbon taxes. Maybe I indirectly do, but fact of the matter is that I also don't know where the carbon tax money does go to, and the rebate that you get obviously isn't nearly as much as the carbon tax. And I think a lot of Canadians nowadays are just drowning in all of their expenses. Life is extremely expensive. Bank of Canada is not dropping those rates anytime soon. So honestly, maybe dropping the carbon tax isn't a bad idea. I think it's just simply too expensive for Canadians, and we just need to allow Canadians to be able to not sink and maybe even float a bit, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I totally agree with all of what you both just said. And in fact, I'm gonna go one step further and say that both the carbon tax and the carbon tax rebate are both a complete grift. I told you I have strong opinions on this. So now that you guys have spoken, I can speak my comments, which is that so the way I look at it is, you shouldn't tax people for consuming things that they need to live, right? It's like if I were to put an extra tax on food, and the carbon tax is essentially like that, right? Because what happens when you don't heat your home when it's negative 40 degrees outside, right? So you guys live in Calgary. So if I remember correctly, there was like a week or a weekend where the temperature in Calgary dropped below negative 40, right? So it's you either heat your home or you literally freeze to death, right? Like that's literally your two options. So in that case, you're paying a carbon tax just to be able to live, right? And I don't think that that's you're increasing the cost of living like at the most fundamental level possible when you tax like things for heating and stuff. And humans need to produce some carbon. Like we can't just by living and breathing, we're breathing out carbon dioxide. So you can't be carbon neutral. Like if you're alive, the only way to be carbon neutral is if you're dead. So this whole like taxing consumption thing, it doesn't make sense, right? Because Canada's population is also increasing. So if we have more people, then we're going to have more people consuming stuff, and we're going to have more carbon emissions, and we're kind of punishing people for like a population growth essentially just because we have more people consuming stuff. So that's number one. And number two, to Dom's point, you said, if you don't pay for, let's say you live in an area where you don't pay for the housing, like heating costs yourself, right? So it's like you're still paying the carbon tax, right? You're paying the carbon tax if you need to fuel up your car. Well, if you say, oh, what if I don't own a car? Well, I assume you buy food from the grocery store, right? Like, how do you think the food from the grocery store gets delivered to the grocery store? It needs to be shipped on trucks, and those trucks run on diesel, right? So you can't avoid the carbon tax no matter what. Like if you need to consume anything, food, like that has a component of the carbon tax built into it already. So it increases the cost of food when you jack up the price of like gasoline and diesel and all this stuff, right? So that's number one. And number two, this carbon tax rebate, the reason why I call it a grift is because it is a grift. So the reason why I call it a grift is because it just doesn't make sense from like a philosophical level, right? So for example, if the government taxes you $1,700 per year, and then you get back, let's say $700, why do they need to do that? Why can't they just tax you $1,000 in the first place? Like, what's the point of taxing you $1,700 and giving you $700 back, right? And my theory as to why they do this is to make it seem like they're giving people free money, because it feels good when you log into your bank account and you see that the government deposited a couple $100s in your bank account, and you're thinking, oh, like, thank the government, we're getting free money from Daddy Trudeau. So it's just like the thing that like people think like initially, right? Like when they get handouts from the government. So it makes people feel good, and then it makes a lot of people more likely to vote for Trudeau because he's going to be seen as the person that's giving people money. But in reality, he's just handing you back your own money that you gave him in the first place, and that he skimmed like 50% of it or even more, and then give you back like the chump change. And then, it's money that you didn't expect was coming, right? Because you thought he was going to take the whole thing. But no, he's going to give you back like, 10, 20, 30% of it. And then you're supposed to thank him and vote for him again. So this is why I call it a grift, right? And if you really wanted to help Canadians, especially now when inflation is so high, when the cost of living is so high, just scrap the carbon tax and give everybody a tax break. And I think that that's the right thing to do, right? As if he really cared about the cost of living, but he doesn't, right? And I know the environmentalist side is going to be like, oh, what about the environment? It's supposed to punish, gasoline and fossil fuel producers. I get that, right? But I think it can't come at the expense of making people starve on the streets, which is literally like it's contributing to that, right? I'm not saying that that's the sole cause of poverty and stuff, but it's contributing to that. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. And obviously, if I haven't made it clear, I think the carbon tax should be scrapped and this whole program should be scrapped. And one final point, as Tristan was saying earlier, what is the money being used for, right? Like instead of giving a rebate, you should maybe invest the money into building out more EV infrastructure, right? That would be a much better use of the money than just giving people back the money in terms of a rebate. So, I got the rebate, and guess what I did with the rebate? It was enough for like 2 tanks of gas. So I got 1 tank of gas, and I used the other half of the money for like steaks and stuff, which, like, people say that eating meat is like less environmentally friendly than eating plants, but it's just like I literally use the money for like some of the least environmentally friendly things, right? It's like I used it for like big steaks, and I used it for a tank of gas. So yeah, this is all like, it just doesn't make sense to me. But let me toss it back to you guys for some final comments, and then maybe we can move on after that.
Some final comments. So one thing that was like on my mind, I kind of want to confirm. So like with the carbon tax, if you get like your bill, for example, on the carbon tax, do you get taxed on the tax? So like there's also like a GST or HST or whatever it's called on that carbon tax as well. So it's like a dual tax, double tax.
You don't get taxed on the GST portion, but it's like, you have you just have an extra tax, right? So it's tax on the subtotal, but it's just like you still have to pay your like sales tax. And like I think for natural gas, like home heating, there's like delivery charges as well. So if you actually look at a bill of like heating costs, like 80-90% of it excuse me, 80 to 90% of it is not the gas itself. It's like delivery charges, and then it's taxes, and then it's like sales tax, carbon tax, this tax, that tax, and there's like a fee. It's all a huge grift, in my opinion.
The portion that you can affect by turning down your heating or turning up your heating is like under a half. It is probably like a third at most that you can actually affect. And that goes for electricity too, honestly. The amount that you can affect by turning up or using more or using less energy is not the majority of it. It's very much like a third at best. And the carbon tax on my bills when I checked last was about 25% of the bill, just to put in perspective. So not the whole bill, but like the 25% of the natural gas home heating portion of the bill. So it's not inconsequential. Like
it's extremely significant, right? Like
yeah,
25% like more, essentially. Like your bill will be 3/4 of the price if they just scrap the carbon tax.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of wild. and then the other fact, well, we weren't going to get into this, but the fact that then some provinces are getting that tax on their heating waived and others are not is also kind of savage. But we'll I'm not going to get it. We're not going to get into that one again.
Yeah, basically it's become like a point of political leverage, right? So yeah, again, we don't have time to go down that debate, but like we talked about it in a previous episode. So if you're interested in watching that discussion, then rewind a bit to I forget what episode it was. You're gonna have to look it up, but we have a clips channel and it's probably there somewhere. But yeah, Dom, did you want to add anything, or do you want to move on?
Leave a like, comment, and subscribe to our channel and the clip channel, and let's move on.
All right. Yeah. So let us stick with the theme of environmentally friendliness and talk about another environment related piece of news. This one involves a eco-terrorist attack at the Tesla Berlin Gigafactory. So there was an arson attack. Somebody kind of set like a tower or transformer on fire. And I think it's like more than that, because it's going to cost Tesla, estimated hundreds of millions of euros, or close to 200 million euros, in terms of the lost business and the damages, because they had to shut down the entire factory for a week. In fact, I think they managed to just reopen the factory earlier this week, but they were like out for a week, and there was around 1,000 vehicles left unfinished last Tuesday. It's not this past Tuesday, but the Tuesday before that, which is like right when the attack happened. There were about 1,000 vehicles that just had to be kind of left just in the middle of the production line because the factory had to shut down. And so the eco-terrorists who attacked Tesla, they named like multiple reasons. Tesla, when they built the Gigafactory, it was kind of controversial too because they had to kind of cut down the forest, and there were a lot of eco activists that were concerned about erasing the habitat of the squirrels and all the other animals that live in the forest that Tesla had to cut down. But yeah, the reason why I brought up this story is obviously you guys know I have some strong opinions about this story as well. But once again, I will leave my opinions to the end. But let me toss a question back to you guys. Like, what do you think is going through the heads of these like eco-arsonists, eco-terrorists, whatever you want to call them? And like what is the problem with Germany in particular, right? Because I mean, I guess we're seeing kind of similar eco-terrorist attacks all over Europe, and I think Europe has taken maybe like a more hardline stance on environmentally friendliness, and maybe some people are taking it a little bit too far, right? As we can see. But what is the problem with Germany or Europe specifically? Because I haven't even like heard of anything like this remotely like this in like Canada, United States, or like China or whatever, right? We're in places where Tesla have other gigafactories. So what do you think is going through the heads of these people, and what is kind of the problem or the big debate here, as you will?
They seem to be under the impression that this is somehow going to help their cause of eco getting rid of like fossil fuels and everything, and being more green in general. I really struggled to see the correlation between blowing up an electrical whatever, what's it, a pylon? Yeah. I don't understand how that is going to assist them in convincing anyone to go greener, especially when it's powering a theoretically greener option, aka Tesla's EVs. So that's a little bit confusing to me. So it seems to me that there's a lot of thought going into how do I hit these bad actors, but then the selection of the bad actors is very confusing to me because I understand that Tesla's obviously going to create some amount of pollution, but I find it difficult to believe that Tesla is the worst actor that they could find, that they were like, yeah, let's go and sabotage something related to. And to be clear, that's not me saying that they should sabotage anything, because at the same time, I'm like, the sabotaging things is also not very convincing. You ever just like break someone's stuff and then try to convince, like, in order to convince them that your argument is correct? It doesn't usually work. So it's just a very confusing thing to do, and especially because like they do understand that it's going to cost a lot of money to fix this, right? And you understand that money could go other places, right? And that money could theoretically go to green stuff, right? So it's just like
so
mentality.
Again, like, to be clear, I'm against all of this, right? I think this is incredibly dumb, but maybe just to play devil's advocate and think of it from their perspective, like Tesla wasn't the only kind of company that they threatened to attack. If I remember correctly, they also threatened like airlines and stuff because, airplanes pollute and whatnot, which I guess would make more sense. And again, this is not me justifying it. I'm like super against all of this, but yeah, I think I agree that it's kind of really peculiar why they decide to attack Tesla and not like, gasoline vehicle manufacturers. But another kind of maybe aspect of this is, it's just like a misunderstanding of economics, right? I always say that all the problems, well, not all the problems, but like 95% of the problems in the world are economic problems at their core. And it's just people, maybe they don't understand economics. It's like, some people think that if we destroy like infrastructure, people are going to have to fix it, and that creates jobs, right? Which is like a completely dumb argument, because like those jobs, sure, you create more jobs, but like that productivity went to going fixing stuff that you destroyed, which means that that productivity doesn't add to the economy as a whole, and it doesn't produce more goods and services. You're just replacing the goods and services that were destroyed before. So it doesn't do anything to boost your economy, and in fact, you're hurting the economy because you're spending money that would have otherwise gone elsewhere, right? But this is how like some people think. And we've seen kind of eco activists blocking roads, which I think is also incredibly dumb, because when you block roads, not all the cars on the roads are electric, right? So cars are going to start to idle. And guess what happens when cars idle? When gasoline cars idle, right? They produce carbon emissions, and people are still going to have to go to where they're going anyways. So once the police shows up and clears the protest, the cars start moving again, and you just wasted everybody's time. And like, what if somebody has an emergency and needs to get to the hospital, but you're blocking the roads, right? So it's just, there's all sorts of like these kind of problems with eco like terrorism, essentially, right? Like, I know that word is inflammatory, but like I'm calling it what I see it is, right? Like it's terrorism, and yeah, it's just very sad. But Dom, let me pass the question to you. What do you think?
All right, here come my analogies, my specialty. No, I'm playing. So, like, the way I see it is, you have a basket of apples, right? I just think it's so interesting that you pick the apple that's maybe has like a few specks of dirt on the side, but like the apple's still really ripe and it's still really good. And so, what I mean by that is, like, wouldn't you say that like Tesla and these quote unquote suspected arsons have like somewhat of a similar view on, like, their looks on eco-friendly like environments and etc. So like, why not go into the basket of apples and pick the one that's like really bad looking or like really worse, right? Like gasoline and companies, why do it on Tesla? So like, yeah, it's quote unquote extremely dumb, right? I don't get why they would do that. And to your point too, like when they do these things, like when you do like repairs and etc., like you're just emitting different types of gases or whatever, and then it's just like a ridiculous process, and it goes away from like your economics point too as well. So I just think it's ridiculous. Yeah.
So you guys want to hear kind of maybe Elon Musk's argument against this, and I tend to kind of agree with his argument on this as well. So according to Elon Musk, all of this, like this eco-terrorism stuff, it's a battle between what's called the humanists and the extinctionists, right? So what does he mean by that, right? So extinctionism is like, there's a group of humans currently on Earth right now that believe that humanity is a plague against the Earth. So because humanity it's like infected, it's like this parasite that's infected the Earth, that's like kind of defiled Mother Nature and all this stuff. The natural conclusion of the extinctionists is to wipe out humanity, right? They want humanity to cease to exist. So things like reducing consumption in the eyes of like with the excuse of environmentalism, that's extinctionism, right? Because if you look at the human population growth chart, like the total population of humans have just hit over 8 billion people recently, right? And with more people than ever before, and it's an exponential chart, we're going to consume more resources just naturally, right? Because we have more people, and as technology improves, we're going to consume more electricity, we're going to consume more energy as a result of that as well. So the reason why I understand a lot about this topic is because it also pertains to Bitcoin mining, right? Where we have all these environmentalist groups that are against Bitcoin mining just for the fact that it uses energy. But what they don't realize is that how much energy do we use now compared to the 1800s? We use a lot more electricity now compared to the 1800s, right? But why? Because we have computers, we have telephones, we have all this stuff, that we have the internet, we have all this stuff that uses electricity that we didn't have back in the 1800s, and we have like multiple magnitudes more people than we had back in the 1800s. So that's why we use more technology, we use more electricity. And if we use the same amount of electricity now as we did back in the 1800s, a lot of people will die, right? But the argument is that this is what the extinctionists want. They want humanity to go extinct so that nature can restore itself. So this is kind of like, I think, where the eco-terrorists that attack Tesla, where they're coming from, is kind of like, we want to take down the infrastructure so that you can stop consuming energy. And if you want to, go even further, maybe it's stuff like carbon tax, right? As I said, like carbon tax punishes consumption. So we're going to tax the hell out of you for surviving. Well, the natural consequence of getting out of paying the carbon tax is you turn off the heat, right? So you don't consume energy at all. But what happens when you turn off the heat and it's negative 40 degrees outside, right? So this is kind of, I tend to agree with that. And this is what I view it as, where the people who are taking down Tesla, or trying to take down Tesla, or trying to take down Bitcoin mining, they hate humanity, right? And they hate themselves to an extent, because they are humans, so they want humanity to go extinct. And this is like a huge battle that we're waging right now, where I consider myself a humanist. I want humanity to prosper and flourish. So I'm against all of this, but this is kind of how I view the conflict, or this debate. But let me toss the question back to you guys. Do you guys think that kind of framing of the problem is accurate? Do you agree with that, or like do you think that there's some truth to it, even if you don't fully agree with it? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts.
Just like a small note, it kind of reminds me of, spoiler alert, the ending of Attack on Titan. War is always going to happen, life moves on, but that's like unrelated anyway. I guess when you put it that way, I didn't know there was a society of people that we want all stuff to like just stop, and then nature just went over. I didn't know people were like that. That's kind of crazy. I'm on more the side of let's let society prosper in like the best way possible, like industrialization, like for sure, even if it's like eco-friendly, like yeah, I'm for it. I know I'm just like more shocked about how people are kind of like that. It fathoms me, but yeah, that's just my comments.
Well, okay, so if that wasn't the case, right? If it's not like if we don't frame the problem as like extinctionists versus like humanists and whatnot, like what other kind of theory would explain, the motivation of people who want to burn down a electric vehicle manufacturing facility, right? Because it's already trying to move us towards renewable energy and more sustainable energy. So like, why would you burn that down, right? Or why would you attack why would you block roads and stuff when that causes more like extinction, that causes more carbon consumption, which supposedly causes climate change, which supposedly causes all of this stuff to happen. So like, yeah, I think that if this wasn't the correct way to frame the problem, then maybe you could come up with another theory. But this is just how I view things, right? So, Tristan, let me toss it to you because it looks like you're dying to talk.
Yeah, I think I find it pretty hard to believe that there is actually a group of any real significance that is advocating for the extinction of the human race. I think in the context of these people, these eco-terrorists or whatever, I find it very hard to believe that their motive is to basically commit mass suicide. Like, so my expectation of their beliefs would be that they believe that global warming, etc., is an extinction level event, or will cause an extinction level event, and that we are going in such a route that they are going to be wiped out, and they are presumably taking extreme measures to do whatever they can to prevent that from happening, aka the extinction level event. So I think that I find it really hard to believe that they're going, yeah, I hate humans, I want us all to die. I think it's more so they're going, I want to survive, I desperately want to survive, and then they're lashing out at perceived adversaries, and that these perceived adversaries, whether they are adversaries or not, they're being lashed out against. And I think that the reaction is not one necessarily of logic. It is more so one of like emotion. It's the fear of this extinction level event that they believe is approaching, which it very well may be. But again, I don't think that their methods are an effective way to prevent this potential future from occurring.
And
so I think that's what I'm thinking.
But wouldn't you say that their actions, maybe they're hasting the demise of humanity? Like, if climate change is really gonna cause an extinction level event, but they are destroying these like critical infrastructure that humans need to live, it's kind of like we're substituting a slow death for an immediate death, right? Like, and is that like better, right? Because
to them it might be, because at the end of the day, like if their goal is to prevent the extinction level event of global warming killing us all in one foul swoop, then everyone reducing consumption, and let's be clear, there's plenty of overconsumption that is happening in the world that could be reduced. That being said, that's not really the point here, but I'm just saying, like, it's there are ways that you can reduce that people could reduce their consumption, that they aren't reducing their consumption, because life is a lot better when you consume more of a lot of different things. You want to eat sushi from Japan, that is going to have an additional expense incurred and an additional carbon footprint. And I think from their perspective, their way of solving the problem is that maybe we need to regress as a civilization, which again I don't agree with, but I don't think it's necessarily that they're looking at this going, how do we die? But they're going, how do we not all get wiped out? And I think that their understanding of how to do that is to move backwards to when we consumed less and we did more things locally, and that there was less globalization, and that all of this stuff is going on that has made our lives significantly better, but has increased our consumption a lot, that we should roll all this back, and then we won't all die a horrible death of melting from global warming.
Yeah, and that's totally illogical in my opinion, right? So,
and I just want to add on that front, I don't think that this is a logical. I don't think this is logical. This
definitely
conclusion
not
going on.
The fact is, if you roll back humanity to 1100 technology, a lot of people are gonna die, right? Because people farmed in ways completely differently. They didn't have like nearly the crop yield that we have because they didn't have tractors and machines back then. Like, you can keep rolling humanity back, and that will for sure reduce our energy consumption, but a lot of people will die. And arguably, I would argue that would eventually also cause the extinction of humanity, right? So like, this whole argument, this is what I mean by extinctionist versus humanist, where they're coming from, like, these eco-terrorists, they're coming from a fundamentally extinctionist point of view, and this is like, that's what makes them that's what should make them the enemy of the public, because they literally want like humanity to fail. right? Like they're literally anti progress and anti prosperity. So yeah, I totally agree with Elon in this when he says that there's a huge battle going on between these two sides, and yeah, it's just again it's coming from a point where I think it's a lack of understanding of economic models as well, where it feels like we're fighting over scraps of the pie instead of trying to expand the pie, right? So it's all about, we only have so much energy available to us. We only have so much, resources available to us. Let's fight over the scraps. And if you're getting like a 0.01% bigger piece of the pie, then you're the enemy and you should redistribute that piece of the pie to everyone who has less, right? Versus what I'm advocating for is let's not fight over the scraps. Let's increase the size of the pie, because the amount of energy, the amount of resources that are available to us is also going to increase as technology increases, right? So, back then we didn't have solar panels, and now we do, and now we unlocked a new source of power. And then in the future, as humanity progresses, maybe we'll unlock nuclear fusion as a way to generate more energy and more electricity. And then after that, we can talk about like Dyson spheres and all that stuff. But that's probably going to be way out in the future. But what I'm saying is that humanity has the potential to increase the size of the pie for everyone, right? We don't need to be fighting over these scraps. And what these like eco-terrorists and what these people like blocking roads and blowing up Tesla factories, what these people are doing is fighting over the scraps. And this is just a fundamentally toxic point of view. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say to that.
Honestly, they're honestly just on heavy drugs. No, I'm kidding. I think it's giving me like flat earther vibes, It's just like they're totally delusional, like not thinking logically at all. And frankly, it's just ridiculous and pretty dumb. Anyway.
Yeah. Tristan, if you don't have anything more to add, maybe we could move on. Okay, so next story is CPI. We're probably not going to spend too much time on this because it's kind of the usual story we've been talking about for a while, but CPI for the United States for February 2024 recently came out, and the year-over-year rate was 3.2%, which is higher than 3.1%. So it was hotter than expected. And this has led stocks to kind of pull back a bit, especially more risky assets like I think Bitcoin pulled back quite a bit as well. But this has people talking, right? Will there be a recession? Because we kind of had maybe a technical recession where we had the US GDP negative for 2 consecutive quarters back in, I think it was 2021 or 2022. But like it wasn't a full-blown recession, and in fact like most economists agree that wasn't a recession at all. So most people are kind of expecting maybe a recession to come soon, but we're still not really seeing the signs of it, I would say, like in the actual inflation numbers, because you would expect inflation to kind of come down if a recession were to hit, but people are still spending a lot of money. And another story is that it's about the yield curve. So if you guys don't know what the yield curve is, it's like a comparison between different duration of bonds. So like these are US government bonds. So if you lend the government money for longer, you're supposed to theoretically get a higher rate of return, right? Because you're locking away your money for longer. You would expect to get more returns. But in times of economic uncertainty, that relationship between short duration and long duration can actually become inverted, right? It flips. Whereas you get less yield the more time you lend the US government money, and you get more yield the shorter the duration is, which is abnormal, right? Because normally, as I said, it's the other way around. So when this happens, it's called yield curve inversion. And there's multiple yield curves, but the usual one that we look at is the 10-2. So it's the 10-year versus the 2-year yield curve. And right now, it's been inverted for over 400 days, which is the longest yield curve inversion in history. And usually when this happens, it precedes a recession. But there's a debate on people. People are debating whether this is gonna, indicate a recession, because it seems like maybe a lot of things are different now compared to back then. But then some people are saying, don't say this time is different, because those are the most dangerous words you can say as an investor. So maybe like chances are this time is not different. So if that's the case, maybe we will get a recession. And considering how long the yield curve has been inverted for, the 10-2 I'm talking about, maybe that means we'll have a really big recession, right? Because it's been inverted for a really long time. So and there are signs of recession. At least I know these CPI numbers are for the US, but in Canada, it's kind of very similar in terms of the trajectory of the economy. A friend of mine recently just, and Dom and Tristan, you guys are both in the group chat, but he posted in the group chat that he went for, I think, like he met up with a colleague in downtown Toronto earlier today. And as he was walking down the streets, there were people digging for food out of the trash bins. So, clearly there are a lot of people struggling. And he says that he's never seen that before. Homelessness has never been like never been great in Toronto. Like there's always been kind of a homelessness problem in Toronto. But, if you ask people who live like in Toronto or around the area, I think most of them will say that it's gotten significantly worse in recent times. So this is just another sign that the economy is not doing well, and a lot of people are getting left behind. So let me toss a question to you guys. Do you guys think that there will be a recession soon? And what do you guys think about the inflation numbers, right? Like, does higher than expected inflation means that the Fed will have to be more aggressive, maybe even raise rates again, or at least not cut rates as much? So just general thoughts.
Well, in my opinion, I don't think it's anything right now to be worried about. I feel this is kind of a bias thing, but the S&P 500 in itself is still doing pretty well, overall. I know you guys don't like the S&P 500 index funds, but I sure as heck do, and it's actually doing not that bad. So I don't think it's necessarily really over for all of us quite yet. I don't know, if I was Jay Powell, I would recommend perhaps pausing for now on the rates, just until maybe the CPI report goes into a better turn of things. But I don't think it's the end for us, the recession of all recessions. And yeah, I guess this yield curve is pretty bad, I guess. But I guess there's other indicators telling us that it's not too bad at the same time too. That's just my point. So I think kind of a false alarm, nothing to worry about.
I think in my opinion, we've been fluctuating between in a recession, not in a recession, in a recession, not in a recession for 4 years now. So it's what is a recession at this point? Like how long can you recession before it's just the new state of being? So I understand that we haven't actually been in a recession, but I've definitely felt like things have been getting more expensive, and everything is there's been an increase in homelessness in every city, not just in Toronto, and it generally feels like things are on a downward trend. They are not on an upward trend still. So I'm not sure when that's going to turn around, if at all.
Yeah, let me butt in with kind of my opinion there. I think here's my theory, right? So I think that we have been having a series of rolling recessions in different sectors that happen at different times, and this is what's so confusing about this kind of business cycle that's throwing a lot of people off. And I know this is the most cursed words in finance and economics, but I really do think this time was different. So what I mean by that is that we had a once in 100-year pandemic, right? So that's of course going to throw some things off, where we have a non-usual event that happened where the economy was shut down, so you couldn't get a lot of services, right? So the first places that were hit with this recession, with this rolling recession, were things like restaurants and just travel, tourism industries and stuff. So that they entered in a recession in 2020 when the pandemic hit and everyone's locked down. So once we start reopening, they got out of the recession, they got into the recovery phase, but then you had stuff like fintech and stuff getting hit, and that's like kind of we had a 2021 boom because the Fed printed a lot of money, but 2022 I really do feel like was one, it was crypto winter, right? So the crypto industry, even though it's a small part of the economy, it definitely got hit like really hard in 2022, and then in 2023 and up until now, I think we're starting to see like fintech getting hit or just tech in general getting hit, right? If you look at the amount of layoffs that's been happening, I feel like if anything, the amount of layoffs in especially tech companies have been accelerating recently, right? So it's only gotten worse. So I think tech is not out of the recession yet. But is there going to be another? And by the way, in 2023, there was also like a regional banking crisis. So not even tech, but just finance in general got hit, right? But yeah, going forward in 2024, what's the next sector that's going to be hit, right? Assuming that at some point, maybe closer to the end of this year, tech will start. We'll stop being in a recession and we'll recover. Maybe there's going to be another sector that's going to get hit by the rolling recession, right? But my theory is that we've had a series of rolling recessions and we never really had one big event like 2008 where like everything collapsed at once. But that's my theory. So sorry I cut you off, Tristan, but let me pass it back to you.
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty aligned with what I was kind of saying of how we've kind of been in recession, out of recession, in recession, out of recession. In a lot of I guess you're taking kind of the point that it's been in different industries, whereas I was kind of speaking more general. And I think you're probably right on that front. I think it's been more industry specific than necessarily the whole 9 yards all at once. Yeah, it's been all over the place.
All right. Yeah, let's, for the sake of time, let's move on to the next topic because we still have two more stories and I want to be able to get through them before we run out of time. So the next story is the U.S. House of Representatives has passed a bill to ban TikTok if its Chinese company called ByteDance does not divest just means sell, TikTok within 6 months of this bill being passed. So this bill has received bipartisan support. So both a lot of Democrats and a lot of Republicans support this bill. So it's, Congress is doing something for once where they're able to agree on something for once, and they're able to pass this bill. The next step it will have to do is pass the Senate. And from what I heard, the Senate is a little bit more kind of lukewarm on this bill, but a lot of senators have also said they support it. And Biden himself has said that he supports it. So if it does pass the Senate, Biden says that he will sign this bill, which means that it will become law, which again will force TikTok to sell itself within 6 months to like a U.S. buyer. So there's been a huge debate on whether or not this is something that we should be doing, like i.e. banning TikTok. And I say we, like I'm speaking from the American perspective. Like in Canada, it's also a big debate, but I'm just going to speak from like the American perspective because this is what's going on and what's being debated right now in America. So the arguments for banning TikTok is that it's a national security threat, right? Because Binance is a Chinese company and it's the parent company. So TikTok is a subsidiary, but still people are worried about potential influence that ByteDance and the Chinese government itself could have on TikTok. So let's say if the Chinese government wanted to promote pro CCP stuff, or they wanted to influence the American elections, maybe they'll try to use the algorithm of TikTok to influence young people, or at least that's kind of the argument. And we can debate on whether that's a real thing or not. But That's number one. And number two is just kind of this idea of reciprocity, right? So reciprocity means like, if you can do something to me, then I should be able to do something to you, right? It's kind of like mutually assured destruction. It's like why, like, if America has nukes, then Russia needs nukes, and if Russia needs nukes, then America needs nukes, and China needs nukes as well. So it's kind of like that mutually assured destruction idea, where China has this huge media platform that is theoretically could be influenced by the CCP, i.e., TikTok, and the CCP might be able to use it against Americans to influence American opinions and politics and stuff. Whereas, Facebook, for example, is banned in China, so Chinese citizens cannot use Facebook. So the U.S. government cannot use social media to influence Chinese citizens to change their opinions. So it's this idea that there's no reciprocity between this. So if we ban TikTok, then we'll have reciprocity again, right? So neither country is able to influence each other's social media. So that's the arguments for, and we'll go through the arguments against, and then I'll pass the question to you guys, and then I'll state my opinion. But the arguments against is that this is free speech. So like, why is the government kind of putting their hands inside of like these social media platform and trying to influence what people can or cannot say, right? Because if the government, and the wording of this bill is criticized for being vague, where if the president determines that if a social media platform is guided by a foreign adversary, then they could shut it down or ban it or censor it or whatever, right? So I haven't read the exact verbiage, but I saw like a screenshot of like one of the pages, and it said something similar to that. So there's potential First Amendment rights violations potentially, right? So again, maybe this will have to be debated in court, but there's free speech concerns. That's number one. Number two, a lot of American livelihoods depend on TikTok. So I know, like, people hate influencers and that kind of job, but the essentially, when you boil it down, a lot of people do make a living off of TikTok, right? And a lot of people advertise on TikTok too, where if you're a small business and you advertise on TikTok, that might be a source of getting the word out about your business, about your product and services. And if you ban TikTok, then that's like a huge stream of getting the word out that will no longer exist. And a lot of creators make a living off of TikTok. So you're going to be destroying the lives of those people as well if you ban TikTok. And number three is that a forced sale will only benefit rich and powerful people or corporations. And what I mean by that is that if you force TikTok to sell, then everyone's going to know that they're being forced to sell it, not because they want to, but because they're being ordered to. So they're not going to be able to get a good price for it, which means that most likely, number one, like Meta will be super happy that TikTok is gone, right? That's just a fact. So Meta stock is probably going to go up if this bill passes. And number two is that whoever ends up swooping in and buying TikTok is going to be able to buy it for pennies on the dollar because it's a forced liquidation essentially, and they're gonna be able to take it over for pennies on the dollar and instantly profit, and then profit even more by growing it and stuff. So it's kind of like a cheat code to getting like a huge audience. TikTok has millions and millions of users, right? So it's gonna be a huge boost to whoever manages to buy it. So that's kind of like the arguments for and against. And let me turn the question to you guys. Are you guys in support of this ban or against this ban? Name your reasons why or why not.
It's kind of like a head scratcher. Like, obviously, since we're creators ourselves, like, I'm not in support of like the United States government like wanting to like ban TikTok and such, but that's just somewhat of a biased opinion. Yeah, you can. I mean, it kind of makes sense that there is like a national security threat just because ByteDance is third party. It's not like within North America, it's in China. But is there actually like legitimate proof of them actually doing such actions? And fact of the matter, isn't the creator of TikTok like from Singapore? Like, I don't know the full details, but this is like kind of what I remember. And I guess like North America, Canada, and the States are a nation of free speech, so I guess that would sort of jeopardize that too as well. So I don't think that would be really fair. And like, is this a plot to like to make other corporations rich? Who knows? I mean, so many questions. But one thing I'll say for sure is like I'm in support of not banning TikTok because poor small businesses that use it are not going to have the same opportunities. And yeah, sorry, like what's his name? Like Bryce Hall. Like he's still. It's good for him to get paid at least and make some sort of income, you know. So I'm in support of keeping it.
All right, Tristan, you want to jump into?
Yeah, it's all free market until the Chinese company is winning the free market. So I think this is just the U.S. trying to exert its control. It's had monopoly over social media for so long, and the first time China's gotten an opportunity to go to the moon and shown off that they have a competitive social media platform with that people want to use, America's immediately like, gotta stop that. Can't have that national security threat. Oh my gosh. And I think that is it's very classic posturing. It's very much to me, it just feels like the American government is just like it's kind of like, you know, being like, we can put nukes in Turkey, but you can't put nukes in Cuba. You know, it's very much something along the lines of that to me, where they're like, well, we'll ban it. And I understand that, you know, YouTube and stuff is not like it's banned in China, but it's not like people in China aren't capable of accessing those, from my understanding. Like there are VPNs, there are ways to get around the Great Chinese Firewall. So there's still going to be Chinese consumers who are using American platforms. And even if they're not, they will still be wanting to consume the content either way, even if it's through other sources. And when I write down to it, like, I think this is just the American government basically saying we want their cake as well. And I think that's I don't think it's very fair. It's not that I think that China should have a powerful social media company like TikTok under their thumb, and that they like should be capable of using that for nefarious purposes. But I think it's pretty clear that America has had numerous companies in the same functional fashion, and they're only kicking up a fuss because it's China who has a competitive product. And I just think it's I don't think they should ban it. I think they should let the market speak for itself. Instagram, YouTube Reels, all of those things are going to compete with it. If TikTok's got a better product, people will use TikTok. And you want to see American companies become the leader in the space, make American companies do a better job. I think that's really what it comes down to.
Make America great again. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, definitely. Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, Tristan. I think that I think I've made my opinion on this pretty clear on Twitter already, or X. If you scroll through my X profile, to be clear, I really don't think that TikTok should be banned. I'm against this ban and firmly against it. And the way that we do it here in Canada, I'm not sure if you guys know, but the Canadian government banned TikTok on the phones of government employees, but they didn't go as far as banning it for the general public, which I think it's like an acceptable compromise, right? So if you work for the government, if you could have potential access to government secrets, then don't have TikTok on your phone. I think that's reasonable, right? But I think it's unreasonable to ban it for
for just the general public. And on this idea of reciprocity, where China has control supposedly of this big social media platform that a lot of Americans use, but we don't, like, Americans don't have control over a social media that Chinese people use. Well, a lot of things are reciprocal, right? Like, if you're going to talk about social media, what about, like, the CHIPS Act, right? So I'm not sure if you guys or paid attention to the CHIPS Act, where it forbade companies like NVIDIA or Intel to sell advanced chips to China, right? Because Americans are afraid that Chinese like government will use it to like build hypersonic missiles and put it in their military equipment and stuff like that. So they're afraid that China can just copy it and develop their own chips manufacturing industry. So it's about, like, they use the idea of national interest as well, right? So it's kind of like, that's an area where America has an edge over China, and there's no reciprocity there, right? Like, China basically, they can't really do anything. They have to like smuggle chips from other countries because the American government banned NVIDIA from selling the chips directly to China, right? So there's no reciprocity there. And if you go down the list, there's a lot of things that there's no reciprocity for, right? You're never going to have reciprocity for everything. So that's kind of my argument. And, thirdly, it's like, okay, we criticize China for banning YouTube, for banning Meta and all this stuff. But it's like, if you're going to do the same thing, essentially, right, and ban TikTok, aren't you just as bad as them? So you criticize them for banning stuff, but you're going to do the exact same thing and ban them when you have a similar situation as them, right? So China can also like make the exact same arguments on why they banned Facebook and why they banned YouTube, right? Because we don't want a foreign adversary running a social media platform in our country. And you're saying that, oh, China's like so corrupt, so dark that they're censoring the internet. Well, now you're doing the same thing, right? So I think that's just it just doesn't make sense. And it's really a shame that so many politicians support it from both the Republican and the Democratic side, where I thought it would be like, I thought maybe because Biden has said that he's gonna like enforce action on it. So maybe like I thought the Democrats would be like maybe more for it and the Republicans will be against it. But it turns out that it seems like they're both really for it. And if you scroll down on the docket, and I'll add this photo to the clip to our episode in post. But basically, I think I may have found the real reason, and maybe this is a bit of a conspiracy, but I think I may have found the real reason why the two parties were able to agree so quickly on banning TikTok. And in my opinion, it's not because they want to quote unquote protect the American people. It's all a grift, basically. This is now going to be my quote of today.
Andy's word of the day.
Yeah, it's all a grift. It's a grift because, again, it's an attempted hostile takeover of this big social media platform that will enrich and profit. Will mean a lot of profits for a lot of people and big corporations, right? So this photo that I shared is a news story from basically of former Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, and here's a photo of him right there. And this photo I think was taken during the pandemic when he visited this like mint or the US Mint or something, where they print the money. So it's just like goes to show how meaningless the US dollar is when they just print just sheets and sheets of it, right? But anyways, that's another topic for another day. But essentially what Steve Mnuchin is doing now that he's no longer the Treasury Secretary, because he was the secretary under Trump, but what he is doing now is he's using his Wall Street connections to pull all these rich investors together to make a bid on TikTok. So it's all a grift, right? Like it's a way for him to make money from this and enrich himself and his friends. So there's a lot of capital at stake here, right? Because if you manage to get TikTok for pennies on the dollar and then wait a couple of years, IPO it, make a bunch of money. Like this is, or tell your friends to buy Meta stock, right? Like you buy Meta stock now, wait for this ban to go through, Meta stock goes up, you sell it, and then you make money again on TikTok itself when you IPO TikTok as its own American company. So yeah, this is all it's all a grift. I don't know what else to say, but stop me if you disagreed. Like, do you think this is what's happening?
I mean, it could be a possibility. I guess we live in a world of capitalism, so if anyone wants to take profit for anything, like they're probably going to take the opportunity if they can get away with it. A person called Nancy Pelosi may or may not be doing similar actions, but who knows really? But yeah.
I would not be surprised if this is a contributing factor to it. That being said, I think the American government agreeing on who should be taking over TikTok, good luck with that. So maybe that's not maybe it's not 100%, but maybe it's part of why some people are supporting this deal rather than others.
Well, that's like another concern, right? What if Meta makes a bid and they have a ton of cash, right? And what if Meta acquires TikTok and they end up owning it by the end of all this? We're going to have even more concentration in social media, right? So essentially that'll only be like Google's YouTube versus Meta, and like, Snapchat is not even on the scene anymore, right? So it's like it's going to be it's going to lead to more monopolies and concentration, and I think this is just overall a huge loss for the American people, both in terms of their free speech rights and in terms of just profits for the rich to make them even richer. But this is just my opinion. Okay, so if nobody has anything more to add, let's move on to our last story of the day, which is car thefts in Canada. So this is somewhat of a ridiculous story, and I actually didn't believe it. I thought it was just because a lot of people who are, let's say, anti-Trudeau kind of tried to spin this against Trudeau. And, you guys know I'm not a big fan of Trudeau. So, I'm inclined to maybe even agree with them, but I'm going to try and not make this a partisan issue, but just present the facts as it is, right? So the story is that the police in Canada, or in Toronto specifically, they have advised homeowners to leave key fobs close to the front door to prevent thieves from entering into a confrontation when they break into your house and attempt to steal your car. So in case you guys don't believe me, I actually got a clip of this, and I'm not sure if you guys seen the clip, but I won't play it right here, but I'll insert it in post so that our audience members can see it. But essentially the clip is just a clip of the police officer saying the same thing that I just did. It's like, leave your key fobs close to the door. So it's just to prove that I'm not making this up. It's literally what they said, right?
There's also updated advice for all vehicle owners, a message echoed by Toronto police speaking at an Etobicoke safety meeting last month. Constable Marco Ricciardi had a new message for vehicle owners who keep their fobs in Faraday pouches.
To prevent the possibility of being attacked in your home, leave your fobs at your front door, because they're breaking into your home to steal your car. They don't want anything else. A lot of them that they're arresting have guns on them, and they're not toy guns, they're real guns. They're loaded.
That's why Galinsky says they will be installing the door stops and taking YPR's advice seriously.
I think you guys can sense that I'm thinking that this is like a completely ridiculous story, but what do you guys think of this, right? Let me pass the question on to you guys first before I answer, as always. So, are you going to start leaving your key fobs close to the door? That's the first question.
Well, first and foremost, what I normally do is I keep my keys just right next to me in the bed. I feel like it's the best spot for me, and I can remember where it is all time. Another thing I'll definitely won't do is leave my keys right next to the door, because I think that's honestly completely ridiculous. Let's say, for example, you get robbed in and then they take your keys. It's not like they're just going to go for the keys. They're probably going to go for other things too. They've invested so much. So why not just continue to go through? So I think it's completely ridiculous. And the fact that they already have your keys for us to access versus when you just keep it by your side, you can delay, or if not, like have them not get the keys in general. Like that would probably be better. So I think this whole thing is completely ridiculous, and they could have said something else or like advise other people to do other things a different way. My opinion.
If they can find my keys, I will, gladly take them back from them because, I have no idea where my keys are 90% of the time. So like, if they can actually find them, like, maybe you should have the car. No, but for real, like, I think it would be a giant waste of time for anyone to break into my house to steal my car because the car is not worth that much money. You're really wasting your time. So like I think for my perspective at least, I'm not that concerned about that factor. I think but at the same time I'm just like I kind of understand where the cop's coming from. It's like, oh, they'll just take your car. But a friendly reminder that cars can fit things in them. So if you got other stuff around like laptops that are available, they might just grab a couple of those and toss them in the car while they're stealing your car. Like if you've already gone to the trouble to break down the door, what's the difference between grabbing a couple laptops and the car or just grabbing the car? So I kind of feel like the whole point is not really super relevant. Like, are they really just going to grab the car? And if the goal is to avoid a confrontation, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have a confrontation whether they take the car and they can get to the car quickly or they can't. So I'm just a little bit confused as to the whole general tip. I understand that confronting them, you're more likely to get in danger, but I'm pretty sure even though my car is not worth a ton of money, I probably want to dissuade them from taking my car either way.
So. Yeah, okay. So I think in the clip that I shared, it's like the cop was speaking to like a room of like older people. So maybe that's like what motivated him to say what he said. It's like, if you're old, then like don't fight like these like groups of young 20, 30 something year olds. A lot of these cart thieves are, just young men, right? So if you're like an old person trying to fight a group of them, then you're probably going to get hurt or even die, right? So that's maybe where the cop is coming from. But even that, like, it's just absolutely idiotic in my opinion, because it's like, where do you draw the line, right? Should I also be leaving my cash by the front door so that if they break into my house, it's easier to steal my car and my cash, right? What about my crypto wallets, if I have any? Like, I should leave that in the front door too. What about my laptop and my phone? And just leave every valuable near the front door, so it makes it super easy. So if they break into my house, every valuable thing I own is right near the front door, and they could just take it, and I don't have to worry about it, and I don't have to confront them. It's kind of like reverse DoorDash, right? So why not just do reverse DoorDash? That's essentially like what's wrong with that logic? Like you guys chime in, comment on that. Like what the cop is suggesting is just reverse DoorDash. Instead of you paying somebody to deliver like food or goods to you, you just leave all your valuables in the front door, and then you like signal that the goods are ready, and then like you wait for the people to show up, and then they break down your door, take everything you have, and they don't give you back any money. So it's reverse DoorDash, right? So what's wrong with that logic, right? If we follow the cops' logic.
No, okay. So let's say, for example, you're like a robber, and like you're doing a little Home Alone like robbery scout. If everything's in the front, there's like an easier incentive for you to want to steal things because, oh wait, this cop said everything's gonna be in the front of house. So easy job, guys. You just grab it and then you go. Like, I don't know, it makes no sense to me. If you keep it in the back, it'll not entice them as much to want to steal stuff. But if you have it in the front, they're more likely going to want to do it because of how easy it is. So I understand that if you're old, you need safety, but like I mean, do you want your stuff to go? Like, I don't think that's the play either. Like, all your valuables are going to be gone because it's easier for everyone else to get it. So, I don't know if that's the play.
Listen,
Dude,
here's an idea. Okay, how about instead of leaving your valuables in the front to allow people to just take it, how about we allow the police, or we motivate the police to actually arrest people that break into people's houses, and we motivate the police to, do their jobs. I know, crazy idea, but what do you guys think?
I'm sure the police is doing their arrests, but again, I clearly there is still car theft on the rise here. So, maybe they need more people. Maybe they need more stricter rules that they can apply, or maybe they maybe they need more funding. instead of defunding the police, we fund the police. Anyway. But maybe the police need some help on that front. But I think the solution to this sort of criminal act is not to make it easier for the criminals, but to make it less profitable for the criminals. Therefore, they should be doing something else. And if they can get your car keys right at the door and other valuables, I understand the whole perspective of don't fight them, but like, if I'm getting a $40,000, $50,000 car for kicking down one door, that's going to be more of an incentive to kick down the next door than if I kick down the door, I bumble around a house in the dark for 20 minutes, find nothing, and run away because the cops are arriving. Like, it just seems a little bit, it seems like a little bit of a, I don't know, not the best advice, and not the solution to the problem.
Yeah, so this is an IQ test question, right? So if you make crime easier to commit, do you think that the end result is the crime rate going up or the crime rate going down? I think the answer to that question is extremely obvious, but it seems like our Toronto police just doesn't understand and is confused about what the end result is.
in his defense, speaking to old people, maybe it's a different scenario, but the fact that they took this and ran with it for everyone, maybe that's the news's fault. But like, I think from an old person perspective, yeah, okay, your car is worth less than your life, like, I can do that mathematics, right? But for the average person, I think it's like the younger people, not even that much younger. I think, like, honestly, anyone under 50 would probably be inclined to, grab a baseball bat and scare off some people who, let's be real, they want your car. They don't want to fight typically. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and actually, that brings me to my next point, which is like, what the end result of giving this kind of advice to people is? People are going to lose faith in the police because they're signaling that they're not willing to do anything, and they're just advising you to give up. But, people don't want to give up because cars are expensive. And if you just do the math as how many hours you have to work at your job to earn enough money to buy a car, you probably don't want that car to get stolen. Just saying, right? So the end result of this is people are going to take justice into their own hands, and then you're going to have mob mentality, and you're going to have vigilante justice, and that's a whole nother ball game, right? Because, like, what's to stop people from just buying a gun and defending their property, right? Because people will do that. And then you're just going to have like way more shootings, and it's going to escalate into more issues. So this is just all types of problematic. Dom, let me pass it to you because I know you've been trying to speak for the past, few minutes. But yeah, go ahead, Dom.
Yeah, like what Tristan was saying, I guess it kind of makes more sense if you're older, like under the age of 50, I think you said. Like, yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense, but I still think the whole premise is a little ridiculous. Like, I don't know if it's the play to leave all of your possessions at the front door, make it easier for everyone to steal. like us younger folks can probably just grab a baseball bat and like try to defend ourselves. So
And
not to
actually, there's
play for
there's
everyone.
another problem as well. If you leave your car keys near the front door, there's technology out there that can intercept the signal that your key fob sends out. And if you leave it near the front door, it's easier for their like computers for the intercepting like machines to pick it up, and they could try to clone your signal and get into your car without your key in the first place. So like you're making it easier for them to steal your car without potentially even having to break into your house when you leave your fob near the front door, right? So again, as I said, this is just all types of problematic. Maybe the last question for the day, and then we got to wrap up. I know people have tried to spin this as more of a political issue, and people like, I know Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, actually posted about this, and in that post he blamed Trudeau obviously for this, but how much of this do you think is actually Trudeau's fault, if any, right? Like is like, because the argument is that he's the leader of the country, and under him he's allowing for these crimes to go unpunished and get out of control, and car thefts have been on the rise. Like, that's a fact, right? But how much of it is attributable to Trudeau? And if let's say Pierre was in charge instead, do you think that he'll do a better job at helping clamp down on these issues, or just maybe touch a little bit on the politics side of this?
We're both trying to figure out who's going to talk. Yeah, so with regards to the politics, I think Pierre is going to swing basically anything into a political attack on Trudeau that he can. And I think it's pretty clear that this is something that is not good for the average Canadian that is occurring. And, not the average Canadian is also probably not going to be on board with this line of thinking, right? And so I think that Pierre is basically just tapping into that what the heckism and being like, "Oh, I'll do a better job," even though, will he do a better job? Is this something he could even control? And so on that front, like, I think I wonder if I wonder to what extent Trudeau is responsible for this, because I feel like you could go down a rabbit hole of all the different decisions that have been made and all the different actions that have been made and how they all eventually accumulate into where we are now. But I think that it's pretty difficult to just explicitly be like, this is Trudeau's fault. I think that this is pretty multivariable. And I think some of those variables have been impacted by things that Trudeau has done. But at the same time, I don't think that necessarily those actions wouldn't have been done by a conservative government, in which case it's a bit rich for Pierre to be like, I'm going to throw rocks at you. But he may be living in a glass house on this front, because we don't know if he's actually capable or going to be doing anything to be able to resolve that.
Yeah, you know who we need? We need Nayib Bukele. That's what we need. So like round up all the car thieves and like line them naked, like back to back with each other. Like, that'll solve the issue. But yeah,
that's one way to do it.
My strong opinions. But let me toss it to Dom. What do you think?
Sorry, could you repeat like the question part one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, so the question was, how much of this rise in car thefts and this, inaction or perceived inaction by the Toronto police, and this advice, this ridiculous advice that they gave people, how much of this problem is attributable to Trudeau? Because Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, has posted about this multiple times on X already, and his argument was he's blaming Trudeau for it because it's like, under Trudeau's government this is allowed to happen. But like, how much of that is true, do you think? Do you think that Trudeau is really at fault, if at all? And if he is at fault, how much of the problem is he at fault for? Like, how big is his contribution to the problem, if any?
Okay. I don't, so like the way I see it, I don't see Trudeau like being directly the issue, but like he is a part of the bigger issue. And if like Pierre were to be in power, it would be like any different. Maybe he would tell like the police to do something different otherwise, but I think it's more so about Trudeau like making it really difficult for Canadians to live on a daily basis. Like it's really expensive, and like all these bank rate interest rate hikes and things like this, I guess incline people to want to steal and do more bad deeds. And so there's going to be more circulation of robbery. So like, I guess in a way, more robbery will lead to like robberies. I don't know what I'm going, but like, and then that'll be the case. Like, there's like the cherry on the top. Like you see everything on the front door, the front porch. Then yeah, of course you're gonna want to steal it more. But he might be like not directly affecting, but in a way affecting just because of the state of economy. And I don't know if it would change necessarily, like if it was like a political like switch, but it's hard to say. I don't know.
Yeah, so to this topic, my opinion is just that everything about this issue is unacceptable. Like this advice is unacceptable. This rise in car thefts is unacceptable, and the state of our economy is unacceptable. So, given all of that, we can have a debate about who exactly is to blame about all of this, but as you said, Don, like Trudeau, he's the leader of Canada, and at least as of right now, probably it won't be after the next election, given the trends that we're seeing. But he's the leader of Canada right now, and it's under him that a lot of this is allowed to happen. And I understand that he doesn't control everything, and I understand that he's not the direct cause of all of these problems. But I think as a leader, you need to take some responsibility, and he's not doing so. So it's just, I think people are, including myself, are kind of maybe looking for people to blame. And, I agree with Tristan that like maybe Trudeau is not directly, like, it's not the way that Pierre framed it. It's like he's the direct one that's responsible for all of this. But it's just, I think it's a series of bad decisions where, as you said, like the economic decisions leads to more poverty, which leads to more crimes, and the police is not really helping by giving advice like this because it's just making crime easier. It's like a whole cluster F of problems, and Trudeau's not helping making all of this better, right? So this is just my frustrations, and I think there is some truth to what Pierre said, where I think Trudeau needs to take some responsibility and really reflect on how we can solve these problems to make life better for everyday Canadians. And he's not doing his job right now. So that's just my opinion. And yeah, do you guys have anything more to add to that? If not, we can maybe wrap up. All right, great. Dom, why don't you take it away with the outro?
Alrighty, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed our Zillennial Money podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast channel and our clips channel and our personal channels as well. So on that note, peace out, guys.
All right, have a great night, guys.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.